years. Before I get started with the whole Lagunitas spiel, I guess I'll bore you with a little bit about myself. Just remember throughout the whole presentation that beer speaks, people mumble. So I'm going to be doing a lot of mumbling. Whenever you just want to kind of turn me off, just sip some beer, please do so. Beer is cheap. Our beer, therapy is expensive. Beer is cheap. You know, marijuana's not too expensive these days either, but that's okay. So yes, anyways, Thomas Rowan, I've been with Lagunitas for 3 years. I got hired with them right out of college. I did a little internship for them. Basically, it just came up. One of my buddies had been working for the brewery for a little while, and he's like, hey, man, you're 21. Do you want to come out to California and smoke a little weed and work for a brewery for 3 weeks and get paid for it? I'm like, yes, please sign me up for that. I will do it. So I did a little logistics internship for them. It was kind of cool. The reason I like to tell this story is because this was back in January of 2011. I did a kind of a cost-benefit analysis. Started it, didn't really get into it too much, but of like kind of cold off-site warehousing for Lagunitas, whether it would make more sense for us to ship by rail or to get an off-site warehousing in Atlanta, Chicago, New York, so that we could basically get fresh beer throughout the country to everyone. And the reason I think it's kind of cool is because all that work I did basically got thrown away when they gave it to a new group, and they were like, listen, we should just build a brewery. So I think it was kind of cool that in a couple of years it just didn't make any sense for us to start shipping by rail, refrigerated shipping, anything like that. We just needed to build a second brewery at Lagunitas, which is what we've done this last year. We built our second brewing location in Chicago, Illinois. I will say all of the ales you will be drinking tonight are all brewed and bottled in Chicago. If you have any issues and you think they taste differently than the ones that come out of Petaluma, California, it's not my fault at all. Just call the brewery, someone will answer, take it up with them and be like, listen, it doesn't taste like Petaluma. But I promise it tastes the exact same. We do a lot of quality control at the brewery. Most of our quality control is done by all of our upper management. It's basically drinking. They just drink a lot of beer, IPAs, Maximus. A lot of daytimes now. We basically brew daytime so that you can drink a beer during the daytime, essentially. But anyways, back to me a little bit before. So I did that internship, worked at the brewery for a couple of years, so I actually got to live in Petaluma and basically just learn from all of Lagunitas, all the guys who have been around since 1993, since our brewery first came about. Tony McGee, it took him about, I think, a year to know my name, which was cool because he still acknowledged me anyways, but, Tony's a little space-minded sometimes. He's got a lot going on up there. But yeah, all the stories that you'll be hearing tonight are basically how I've learned them and heard them directly from the breweries. I've been a part of a couple of them, luckily, but I was not around for the undercover investigation shutdown ale. I was definitely supporting 420 during that time, but I was not at the brewery. So did that for a couple years in Petaluma. Sorry about that. And then now I live in Kansas City, and I sell Lagunitas in Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. So I run around the Midwest and sell our beer. But so yeah, Lagunitas Brewing Company, the reason we are all here today. We've been around since 1993. We were started by Tony McGee. Tony McGee is our imperial warlord, as he calls it. Let me wet my whistle really quick. Hold on. But yes, Tony McGee started our company back in 1993. Before he was doing Lagunitas and brewing beer, he was a printer. He did a lot of printing ads, worked with companies for Bank of America, Starbucks, Royal Cruise Lines, all that stuff. And when he first started Lagunitas out of the on his stovetop kitchen and selling kegs out of the back of his Ford Ranger pickup truck, he was paying all the bills with those printing checks that he was making in his full-time job. So that's how Lagunitas was funded and started. It was started on his brother-in-law gave him a homebrew kit back in Christmas of 1992, and when he gave him that, Tony just started brewing. 4 or 5 weeks later, he had his first brews out and ready to go, and he started tasting them. People really liked the way the beer tasted, and they were like, hey man, this is pretty good. You ever thinking about selling it? And then he was like, not really, I'm just kind of messing around a little bit. And then he met someone by the name Ron Lindenbush. I do not know if any of you St. Louis natives have heard the name Ron Lindenbush before, but he is from St. Louis originally, so the second employee from Lagunitas is from St. Louis. A little tidbit about that. If you guys have ever seen our mason jars, there's 3 numbers on it. 3.14, 10/6, and 420. They're all 3 numbers that are very near and dear to our hearts at Lagunitas. But the 3.14 one represents pie, and I knew that the whole time. It represented pie, but then it took me to move it to Kansas City, and I was spending time in St. Louis, and I was like, hey, Ron, I know 3.14 means pie, but does it have anything to do with 314 in St. Louis? And he goes, you know what, Thomas? You're right, man. I've always liked pie because it was the St. Louis area code, so there's kind of a little St. Louis connection to Lagunitas that is always there, and it's because our second employee was Ron Lindenbush. So does everyone have a daytime beer in front of them right now? Everyone's sipping on that? Okay, so we'll talk about the daytime. Sorry, I get very distracted. I have a severe case of ADD, ADHD, and all that stuff, so I'll be spacing throughout. Plus, I celebrated 420. Whenever they have these beer schools after 420, it's kind of a problem for me. But anyways, I'll try and be as on the ball as I can. But daytime. This is our version of a Session IPA. We actually, on the label, call it a fractional IPA. When we put that, anything we really put on labels, I end up getting asked about. And the problem is I actually don't usually like check out our labels like the first time we start selling beers because it just doesn't really mean too much to me. And they'll start asking me questions about stuff that's put on the label. And all of our labels, all of our artwork, all of the descriptions of our beers, the stories around the labels, the stories around the six-packs. I'll actually, in case you guys have not bought any Lagunitas ever before, but here, take this around and pass it around if you don't mind. But we got stories around all of our labels and on the bottom of each six-pack, and that's basically just the mumblings and rumblings of Tony McGee, our owner. He, like I said, he took his printing profession and he transitioned it with Lagunitas. So he does all of our labels, all of our artwork. He picked out the dog, he picked out Millie Farmhouse, our little something girl right there, and he does all that stuff. But daytime, when it came out, it said fractional IPA on the thing. Everyone think that we created a new category, and I was like, fuck it, man. There's new breweries coming out. There's new beers coming out. There's new categories being created. Why not just create one? So I lied a little bit. I was like, yeah, fractional IPA, man. It's like just not quite there of an IPA, but we create our own category. We've won like 10 awards. Like we're the world champion of the fractional IPAs. Everyone's like, no way, that's so cool. And I was like, no, I'm just fucking with you. So it is a Session IPA. The reason we brewed it is because, well, all the employees at Lagunitas, we like to drink a lot. And we found ourselves drinking a lot of Miller High Life, but then Tony and Ron were like, dude, we're a brewery. We can start making our own beer that's a little bit lower alcohol. Most of our ales tend to be higher than the 6% threshold. We got the Maximus at 8.2. We got the Imperial Stout upwards of 9. Brown Sugar at 10%. But we wanted to make a nice lawn mowing beer. Lawn mowing drinking beer, as we called it. So what do? We brewed a little sessionable IPA. We're Lagunitas, so we had to make an IPA. We had to hop it up. The daytime we dry hop the ever-living hell out of it. We use over a pound of Cicero in each barrel. And actually, on that note, I will say, that's probably one of the only hop names you'll hear from me tonight because they really don't tell me too much about what the hops we put in the beers. That's why we say beer speaks, people mumble. But I know we dry hop the hell out of daytime with the Citra hop, so it's got a really nice grapefruity nose on the front end, and it's just a nice light-bodied 4.5% beer, about 54.20 IBUs. I knew there was a decimal in there, so I had to get it in there. But yes, it's got some hops in there, but it should drink nice, light, and sessionably for you. So we were like, oh, what the hell are we going to call this beer? Tony says when you're running a craft brewery, you're brewing all these crazy beers, he actually thinks that it's harder to come up with the name of the beers than the actual brewing recipes. So spends a lot of time thinking about our names of our beers, and I will speak on the beer that is our flagship. We just call it IPA because, well, we want everyone to know they're drinking an IPA. But we got the Lil Sumpin, we got the Maximus, Daytime, Brown Sugars, all those fun names. But Daytime, I think that name just makes sense because when you want to drink sessionable beers, you want to be able to drink a few of them. Drink it during the daytime. The second part of daytime that makes a lot of sense with Lagunitas is if you're from Colorado, you're from California, Washington maybe, and you have some medical issues and you go and get yourself a little card, you go into the store and they'll basically tell you up front, and you're like, hey man, what do you want? We got your indicas and we got your sativas. What looks good to you today? How are you feeling? What would you like? What's going to float your boat? And at Lagunitas, that basically means, well, indicas, those are your night times. Those will be the body highs. Those will make you sink into the couch. The sativas, those are the nice head eyes and keep you kind of floating throughout the day and working. Sometimes, you might be driving 3.5 hours from Kansas City to St. Louis. You get a little bored. You're just driving straight on 70 and you want to take a little rip. You want a sativa. You don't want to sink into the back of that seat there and just be rolling right along and then maybe get in trouble. But anyways, daytime is like your sativa, so you can keep going throughout the day. I don't know if anybody has tried any of our seasonals, but one of the new seasonals for Lagunitas earlier this year was nighttime. And, well, we had daytime. Daytime's your low ABV, sessionable beer to drink during the day. What's nighttime going to be? Nighttime, we want you to put it to bed at nighttime. It's a black IPA. We had it out in the Bomber. I think there's still a couple around, some stores around here if you guys want to catch it. Still pretty damn good because of that nice malty base in there. But nighttime's an 8.2%. It's the evil big sister of daytime. And, yeah, so we have daytime and nighttime at Lagunitas. All right, so back to the brewery and how it started. Sorry if I keep having these little outbursts. I noticed that it just freaking screams out the speaker. But Tony McGee started the brewery on his kitchen stove in a small town, West Marin County, which is just north of San Francisco. Lagunitas is Spanish for like little lakes, lagoons, and it's a small little, also the name of a small little surf town. When I say small, I mean it's like population 100 in West Marin. That's right where he started it. He was basically started brewing an Imperial Red and Pale Ale were kind of Tony's first beers that he came out with, and he was just basically selling them as house labels. Actually, our first Lagunitas handle was at the House of Richards. I just kind of be a little mature with that. I'm like, oh my God, our first handle was at the House of Dicks. That's so funny. But it's pretty true, and we actually have the House of Richards sign hanging up in our loft right now, so always hold that near and dear to our heart. But Tony started it in Lagunitas, and he was then he had to actually get a little brewing operation going. Couldn't just keep up with it on the stove. He had started selling his beers, and people were digging them, and they wanted more and more of them. One of the funny things about Lagunitas now that we're 21 years old is we have a lot of capacity issue problems. We just haven't been able to brew enough beers, and that's because it's all your faults. You guys drink too many of them, so we just can't supply enough of it. But that's been happening all 21 years we've been around, and so Tony has every year had to worry about adding more capacity and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we moved to a little town called Forest Knolls, brewing there for a little while, and basically as a home brewer, are there any home brewers around here? All right, all you home brewers, you know way more about beer than I do, but don't make fun of me for anything I get wrong. But anyways, Tony was basically, you guys have to pitch all of your waste, and after the brewing cycle is done. So when you pitch all that stuff, it creates something called BOD, biological on demand, I think is what it's called. And he was just throwing it down the toilet, down the drain, whatever, not really worrying about it. Well, when you pitch something like that down the drain, it has yeast in it. Yeast is a living, growing organism. And in a small little town of Forest Knolls, it doesn't really have the septic systems that a big city like St. Louis may have. So basically it was just eating everyone's shit and just growing and backed up the whole town. And they were like, Tony, listen, this isn't going to work out very well. You're going to have to get the hell out of here. So they not so kindly asked Tony to leave, and he was like, all right, I think I've worn out my welcome, so I'll take off. So that happened in 1995. So in 1995, Lagunitas moved to Petaluma. Petaluma is a small little town, kind of little farm community of about 60,000 people, 35 minutes north of San Francisco in Sonoma County. So Sonoma County, wine country, beer country. It's just lovely, beautiful out there. I highly recommend going out and checking it out. If you have a significant other that really likes wine, convince them that way, and then you get to go visit all the amazing breweries. You know, if Lagunitas isn't going to pull you to Northern California and really big beer geek, go for Russian River and then just catch us on your way back down from San Francisco. It's just 30 minutes north in Santa Rosa. But anyways, got a little cottonmouth going, so I'm going to sip on this little something something that we just got poured in front of us, and I'll talk about that, and then I'll dive into Petaluma. All right, so a little something something. This is my top 3 Lagunitas beers. Basically, it's my favorite beer to drink during the summer for Lagunitas. Why? And that's because it's a hoppy wheat pale ale. We use 3 different types of wheat that makes up 50% of the recipe in there, and I think the wheat gives it a wheat, not weed. Sorry if I get that mixed up, but it gives it a little, it lightens it up a little bit. And I know everyone likes the session beers and lower alcohol, whatever. I drink a little something something during the summer like it's a session beer, and I don't care how drunk I get. It's great. But that's why coming out with Little Something Extra this year was a problem for me. I just couldn't handle that Little Something Extra. extra percentage of alcohol on top. Didn't do much for me. But yes, Little Sumpin Sumpin. It's a sessionable hoppy wheat pale ale at 7.5%. Got about 64.20 IBUs in there. We like to use our decimals. They usually end in .20. It's actually kind of been ingrained in my memory. Whenever I like pump gas, I'll usually end on like 44.20 or like 54.20. I just think it's kind of funny. And like when you're like leaving a tip at a bar, every time like it's in that like $4 tip range, I was like, oh, tipping 4.20, and you actually won't know how many comments you'll get back from the bartenders. They're like, oh, dude, that's so awesome. They do, exactly. We're good peoples. They really do. So goes a long way, just a little decimal point. But yes. Little Sumpin Sumpin, hoppy wheat, great beer, drinks light, drink it like a session. I'll pass the 6-pack of this around if you guys want to check out the story on it as well. And if you guys have any questions on the stories or the stuff that you good? Stop racial profiling. But yeah, Tony, if you guys actually are on Twitter and you guys really want to see what Tony McGee's all about, I highly recommend following Lagunitas Tea. It'll be more of what's on these labels that you try and comprehend. I don't really understand too many of them. Just take it for what it's worth. I mean, he's a creative guy. He's very interesting, and I kind of look at him like he's a mad scientist. He looks like he's got a lot going on up there, and he kind of mumbles along in his way, but he knows exactly what he's talking about. He knows how to run a brewery, and he knows how to make some damn good beer. But back to Petaluma in Lagunitas, 1995. We'll climb along the ladder. We were in basically a 30-barrel system off of Ross Street, and that's basically where we started kind of mass producing Lagunitas. We were in California, we were in Oregon, we were in Washington. We had started to, grow beyond just a really, really tiny, small local brewery, and we'd started expanding to make more beer. So in the Ross Street location for about 4 years until we outgrew that. 1999 came along. We had to graduate to a new location, so how is Tony McGee going to move Lagunitas from one place to the other? He's going to hire a New Orleans marching band. We had to, Ross Street is right here, Petaluma, Ross Street's right here, McDowell's right here. It's basically a little mile walk between the two. You just had to kind of cross one major intersection, and we had basically talked to the Petaluma Police Department. We're like, hey, we got to move. Can you guys block off some things so we can, walk some equipment across the street? Will you help us out? They're like, yeah, sure. They didn't really take us too seriously, like they never really do, and they didn't come, so we're like, screw it. So we had basically these stilt walkers who were doing traffic patrol on McDowell Boulevard trying to get people to stop. And we just had like a 300-person marching band going. And Tony and Ron were like, hey, everybody grab everything that's not bolted to the floor, pick it up. We're moving to McDowell Street. So McDowell Street is where we've been since 1999. So I guess 1999, it's like 16 years now. Yeah, we've been at that location for 16 years, and it has not looked the same ever since 95. It changed to 96 to 97. The brewery's always been growing. When I was working at the brewery for a couple of years, all the sales reps would come in for skunk train and meetings and stuff like that, and they'd be like, wow, man, I can't recognize the brewery. There's new tanks added. There's new brew houses going on. I'm like, man, it changes every day. We're adding tanks. We're taking away parking spots. We're taking over new buildings that are next to us. We're just growing so fast, and it's really crazy, and it's been happening for a while, and it's because you guys keep drinking the beer, so keep doing it. But not too much to where we run out, but that's not going to happen anymore because we got a second brewery. But anyways, 99 happened. 2000 into 2001, we were getting into one of our favorite year-round beers, which is called the Censored, which kind of brings me to my first little beer story. We have a lot of stories with our beers, and it's basically because we either screw up or we just don't ask for permission to do things, but one of which is the Censored. It's a malt amber ale, and we are essentially calling it the Chronic in California. This was okay in California because they're a little bit more liberal than everyone, so we were calling it the Chronic, getting away with it. They were fine with it. As soon as we went to get federal label approval to sell it outside of states of California, we had to send it into the ABC. Went across the guy's desk, and he was like, wow, Chronic. I don't know what that is. So his son was interning for the company at the time. He's like, hey, he's like, I got this beer label. It's called the Chronic. I don't really know. Do you have anything? Can you explain it to me? And he's like, Dad, Chronic's like a slang term for like really good weed. And he's like, well, they're not going to call a beer that. So basically, denied the label, sent it back to Tony, and was like, listen, that's not going to happen. So Tony was a little pissed, and when Tony gets no told to him, he's like, all right, well, let's figure out how we can get around it. So he wrote a letter back, and he's like, Budweiser, it says, obey or pass the buds. Red Hook, that's a strain of weed grown up in Canada, which isn't true, but he knew that they didn't know it, so he said it anyways. He's like, why can't I call a beer the Chronic? He's like, you're censoring us. And he's like, I feel like I'm being censored. So then Tony's like, oh, censored. I'll just call it censored. So we have a censored label over the Chronic behind it. Every year the censored label gets a little bit smaller, just to expose a little bit more of that Chronic. But, that's just the Lagunitas way of doing things. We got a new beer? No? On to the next one? Oh, sorry. I was skipping ahead. My bad. I just got excited because it was IPA, and I just like drinking more and more IPA. Thank you, sir. Sorry. All right. Does everyone have an IPA or is hopefully getting one soon? That is the reason I'm here. That's why I jumped ahead and got really excited. We like to say IPA keeps the light on at the brewery. It's the beer that is 60% of our business. It's our fastest growing. Basically, in 1995, Tony was still brewing the Imperial Red and the Pale Ale, like those were going to be the beers that we were going to keep making. He kind of did a little soul searching and thought about the Pale Ale. He's like, hey, man, there's a nice brewery just down the road of us, Sierra Nevada, that brewed a hell of a pale. He's like, that's their thing. I'm going to break off, throw a little bit more hops in there, make it a little higher in alcohol, and call it an IPA. And so the IPA has been our flagship since 1995. I think we were actually one of the first breweries to make the IPA flagship. Right now IPAs are hot. They're the fastest growing craft category. Everyone's brewing an IPA now. They're brewing an IPA, a double IPA, a sessionable IPA, a triple IPA, a dry hopped IPA, a fresh hopped IPA, fresh squeezed IPA. Everything's IPAs, and the category's going crazy. But we're very proud of our IPA. It's been around for a while. As funny as it is being 19 years old, as far as the age of IPAs, especially what we're drinking now, that's actually pretty old and for an IPA. So we're proud of it. It still is 60% of our business. It's the fastest growing beer for us everywhere, and I would just describe it as a nice, well-rounded IPA. It's got a nice little hop note up front on the nose, and then on the back end, you're not going to get too much bitterness because it's going to kind of be washed away with the sweetness of the malt there. And at 6.2%, it's not crazy up there in alcohol, but it drinks just right, and it's tasty. Very tasty. But, yeah, so Lagunitas IPA. Cheers, everyone. Thank you guys for having me and letting me speak in front of your beer school tonight. Shutdown Ale. Okay. Yeah. All right. That was the next one. Good. Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale. So this happened in 2005. Basically between 2001 and 2005, not too much happened at Lagunitas. Basically, lots of employees were still getting paid with beer, and we were just kind of partying along. And in 2001 started our 420 parties. Basically, at Lagunitas, the party starts at 420. Yes, we're going to go celebrate a little bit, and we're going to, be smoking a little some of this and a little some of that. But at the brewery, still today, all of our bands start playing music at 420, and that's just, what time we kick off the party. So, and that's essentially what 420 was meant to be when it was started by the Waldo brothers way back when. But basically, in 2005, our 420 party started to get a little bit more popular. More people started showing up. And so what happens when things get popular, the government comes jumping in. They're like, oh, you guys are having too much fun. We're going to screw it up for you. So they heard that Lagunitas was selling beer and selling weed in order to get people to come to these parties, when, in fact, we were just selling beer and smoking a little bit of it. So they were way wrong. They send in these undercover agents to basically walk up to employees and ask them if they could buy some. They're like, hey, man, do you got any extra weed that I could buy off of you? And the employee would be like, no, but I'm getting off on break in like 20 minutes if you want to go smoke. And they'd be like, oh, no, that's okay. So they were like asking to buy weed. Then they got asked if they wanted to go smoke it for free, and they said no. What kind of stoner does that? It's ridiculous. And so that was a little fishy. They also tried to get us in trouble for over-serving people who are like visibly too drunk. Couldn't bust us on that. They tried to get us to serve people with fake IDs. We wouldn't do that, and so they couldn't get us in trouble for anything. But on basically, we call it the St. Patrick's Day Massacre at Lagunitas. It's not a horror movie. It's just a real thing. March 17, 2005, we had a big 420 party. There was like 150 some people there, and We were celebrating 420 at 420. Ron was down in the beer garden lighting up a little joint with a few of his friends, and that's when the ABC came in along with the Petaluma police and arrested Ron and basically charged the brewery with disorderly house moral turpitude. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's something they came up with back in the 1920s so that brothels wouldn't be able to serve alcohol. So that's something actually Lagunitas is kind of proud of. We were compared to a brothel, so that's a pretty sweet deal. But yeah, so they threatened to shut us down for a year and a half, and we took it to court because that was just ridiculous. The judge was pretty cool about it. She's like, you couldn't get him in trouble for selling anything. You couldn't get him in trouble for, over serving people or, serving kids underage. All you got him for was smoking. And to be honest, the people who were smoking at the brewery, they have some medical conditions and a card that says they can smoke. So, that's here. But smoking near where consumer goods are being produced is illegal. So she took the penalty down, the suspension down from a year and a half to 20 days and said we could take this suspension within a year time period from when we got in trouble. So basically in January of 2006, we were installing a new bottling line. And when you install a new bottling line at the brewery, you're going to have to be shut down anyways. So we're like, awesome, we'll shut down in January. So we loaded all of our distributors up with beer in December. And in January, we had to install the bottling line. So we shut the brewery down like we needed to do anyways. Shut down for 20 days, and that was that. 21st day, dude comes in to give Tony back his brewing license. And so what does Tony do when he gets in trouble? He talks a little shit, and he goes, hey, your mom must be really proud of what you're doing these days. Is this, what you wanted to do when you got older, come in and shut down small businesses, or just trying to make it? And the guy goes, no, I really didn't. It's like, well, what do you want to be then? He goes, I wanted to be an astronaut. So kind of the reason I passed around the little six-packs is the label of the Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale bottle starts with this aggressively bitter ale. We felt aggressively bitter at the time, so that's how we brewed Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale. The BJCP definition should be an aggressively bitter ale. That's how I vote. They should categorize that one. But this aggressively bitter ale is brewed for all of the would-be astronauts in the world, so he takes a little shot at them on that one. So, yeah, that's Tony. That's the Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale story. After it all happened, what does Lagunitas do in situations like that? We brew a beer in celebration of it, and they're like, hey, man, we got shut down. Let's celebrate it. And Robin McLean, actually, our accounting lady, she came up with the name of it. She wanted us like, what are we going to call this beer? She's like, well, let's call it Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale so we can, because that's how it happened. They're like, oh, makes sense. So it's always funny when when I'm pouring an Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale at events. Everyone will be like looking at the label because it's really scrunched up. You can't really see the letters. They don't know how to say Lagunitas. They're like, La Quintas Undercover Investigation. That sounds scary. And I'm like, just call it USA for short if it makes you feel better. But yeah, Lagunitas. Maximus. On to the Maximus, final beer of the night. IPA Maximus. This beer is basically everything that is in the IPA you guys just tried, but 30% more of it. 30% more hops, 30% more malt, and it brings it in at about 8.2%. So I like to describe Maximus as a juicy beer. You should hopefully get some wonderful hops up front. A little bit of spice in there on the alcohol, but that's why I love Maximus. You can drink a few of them, and you just be set right for the rest of the night. It's perfect. So yes, Lagunitas IPA Maximus, that's that. But I was actually getting into more of the seasonal stories, which I want to keep going because there's a couple of stories that are very fun that I didn't get to tell yet. But Undercover is one of them. Another beer that is one of them is our seasonal 2 from now, Brown Sugar. Has anyone ever tried our Brown Sugar? Do you guys know the secret ingredient that's in Brown Sugar? Yeah, Brown Sugar. You guys are good. Smart crowd. So we do have so Brown Sugar. This actually, I skipped over this This happened in 1997. Basically, we were brewing a gnarly wine, and one of our brewers at the time didn't really know how to do it, and we used honey as a fermenting agent in the gnarly wine, but we ran out of honey at the brewery, so the guy there was like, we don't have any honey, but we had like a bag of brown sugar there for something. I don't know, maybe someone was making some oatmeal, and he threw that into the tank, and then as soon as he did that, he's like, I immediately regret this decision. So he called up Tony, he's like, hey, threw some brown sugar into our gnarly wine recipe, what do I do? And Tony's like, Tony doesn't like to fire anyone, so he definitely didn't fire him. He's like, oh, what are we going to do? So he wasn't going to make him go buy a bunch of honey at the grocery stores. I mean, do you know how many freaking teddy bears you'd have to squeeze into the tanks to actually get like a full thing of gnarly one out of them? So he's like, that doesn't make any sense. So he's like, go buy all the brown sugar from all the Safeways and the Costcos that are still open. So we went and brought a shitload of brown sugar, threw it in the tanks, and let it be. Saw what happened. 3 weeks go by, Tony opens up the tanks. It's like bubbling at him. Didn't look really good. Tasted horrible, so he was like, screw it. Didn't throw it away, let it sit for another couple of weeks, and then when he opened up the tanks again, the storm had calmed a little bit, and outpoured a nice little sweet brown sugar, 10%, low ABV, strong beer for a holiday warmer, we like to call it. But yeah, that's how we got brown sugar. It was a complete accident. And turned out to be our most popular seasonal for the longest of time. I think the only seasonal beer we've had kind of since brown sugar that ended up taking our most popular seasonal was because of brown sugar itself, and that was Lagunitas Sucks, another beer of ours that has a wonderful story and name behind it. But a couple reasons behind Lagunitas Sucks. Basically in 2011, again, brewery was still at capacity, and we couldn't afford to make brown sugar because for every barrel of brown sugar we'd make, we'd lose 2 barrels of IPA, and with the tick we were going at, we couldn't afford to do that. So we sucked. We had to make an IPA instead, so Tony was like, all right, we're not going to get brown sugar to everyone. They're all going to be pissed at us, which everyone was. So we sucked, and we made a cereal medley IPA instead. Unfortunately, the problem with that is we made a really good Imperial IPA that everyone really liked, which created even further capacity issues for us. So
drinking the Maximus, which is what we said,
8.2%, yeah. The fractional. Mm-hmm. 4.6. Daytime to Maximus? All right. So yes, basically that is the evolution of IPAs that Lagunitas has become. Daytime, that's our sessionable one. 4.5% ABV, great to drink during the daytime. And then our regular everyday Lagunitas IPA is built to be an everyday sessionable IPA, but you drink it because it's not going to feel all that bitterness when you drink it. So 6%, and then we have our double IPA, which is the Lagunitas Maximus at 8.2%, and then we actually also have a Hop Stupid, which is our triple IPA. Lagunitas, we love our IPAs. Everyone actually jokes that Lagunitas only makes IPAs, which if you guys wanna, you can throw every category at us. Our beers could maybe fit into each of those. But we do love our hops. We love dry hopping our beers. We have a lot of fun with it. We have a hop cannon that basically shoots into all of our hops in the fermentation tanks as they're sitting there to dry hop it all, get all those wonderful aromas up front. But yes, we have a wide array of IPAs. We have wheat IPAs with the Lil Sumpin Sumpin, 7.5% right in there. But, crap, I lost my place. Cheers. Cheers to the lost place. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, actually with the IPAs, a lot of people ask Tony why he brews the beers that he brews, or how does he come up with the beers that he's going to brew, and he actually says that he doesn't think of the brews before actually the consumers kind of lead into it. Basically, we brewed Lil Sumpin Sumpin back in 2008 because wheat beers were a really big hit, and they started to become a lot more popular in 2008, and they were clamoring for it, so Tony's like, well, we'll come out with a wheat beer. We're going to come out with a hopped up wheat. So a couple of years ago when the Session IPA category came about, he's like, I'm going to brew some Session IPA, or a Session IPA for everyone and kind of satisfy all their taste buds. So he doesn't really try to lead craft with the beers he's brewing, but he just kind of follows where kind of the consumer's going. And I think that's one of the big reasons that, Lagunitas has been able to grow as fast as we've been doing. I mean, the one thing I think I didn't talk too much about today with Lagunitas is kind of actually our size, basically because size is whatever. It doesn't really matter in the brewing in the grand scheme of things. Tony actually is like, screw looking at craft breweries. He's like, I'm going for Budweiser. I want to see where we're at compared to Budweiser. as far as actual worldwide breweries are concerned, we are the 13th largest brewery when you put us in all of domestics and all that stuff. So Budweiser's number one, of course. We're not really even anywhere close to them. But as far as craft breweries go, we are the 5th largest craft brewery in the country. Basically, starting in 2008, I think we were right around the 30th, 27th largest. Next year, we were the 16th. The following year, we were the 12th. Then I think the 6th, and then this year we are now the 5th largest craft brewery in the country. We just hopped over to shoot. Sam Adams is the biggest at 2 million barrels. Sierra Nevada, second biggest, right around 1 million. And then New Belgium and Shinerbach. And then you got good old Lagunitas at number 5. We were going to finish this year at, I think, just over 600,000 barrels. I think we're shooting for like 610 or something like that. And that'll put us up over 50%, and that's just kind of a crazy number for us. It's kind of been that way, and we're kind of like looking at things. Why do we keep growing this fast? Why are people like us so much? And I mean, it just goes back to the whole beer speaks, people mumble thing. I think at the end of the day, people are digging the way our beer tastes, and so thank you guys for liking our ales, and thank you for drinking them. But yeah, I mean, beer speaks, people mumble. That's why we keep growing, and that's why we keep, having to build breweries. And shit, I didn't even talk about the Chicago brewery. We just built a brewery in Chicago, everyone. It's only like 5 hours that way. You need to drive there. It's on 18th and Rockwell, and go check it out. 300,000 square feet of brewery awesomeness. When you walk in, there will be a nice little Willy Wonka music theme song playing in the background. The tap room is on the 2nd level, and then you get to do a tour, which is like a bird's eye view of the brewery. Oh yeah, it's close, man. You guys, Lagunitas literally built it for you guys so it's closer to you, so you can go check it out.